Hello, I'm Janet Estervig, and I work at Attainment Company, and I'm doing a webinar today on expanding opportunities for employment opportunities for youth. And I'm hoping this will be helpful for both transition teachers as well as adult service providers that are helping students find employment in the community. I'm going to now share my screen and start the PowerPoint. And if you have an interest in getting a copy of this PowerPoint, please let me know. Just email me. I'm at janet@attainmentcompany.com. And I'll be having that at the end of this slides too, but it's just simply janet@attainmentcompany.com. Now, I'm giving you information about employment because I have a great deal of experience in this. And as you can see, I was a high school special ed teacher. I was a director for a supported employment agency for 25 years. So I've been placing students and adults with disabilities in jobs for many, many years. I also went back and got my degree as a registered nurse and ran a personal care agency providing personal care for those individuals that needed assistance in their home. And then I moved on to Department of Health Services as their Employment Initiative Section Chief. So I've done the training and I'm talking from very practical experiences to share with you on both engaging employers and looking at ways that you can really help support students in thinking about careers and jobs. So now the last couple of years I've been at Attainment Company and absolutely love it, and I'm able to do a lot of work on curriculum. We developed a pre-employment transition services solution. So if you're interested in any of that, of course you can go to our website. But today is going to be about youth. We're going to say, what is it that youth want after high school? How is this any different than any youth graduating from school? So they want to have some meaningful day activities, just having things to do. They want a job, and it doesn't matter what the level of disability is. People want to work and can work. We want to have an opportunity to continue post-secondary education or have an opportunity to look at additional training. Some training might only be like an 8-week training for a certified nursing assistant. Some might be a full semester, some might be apprenticeships, some might be a school year. And so just getting additional training to kind of look at what your interests are for careers. Definitely youth want to live on their own, and some may need some personal care attendants, some might need support staff, but people want their own place. They want to live in their own place and being able to get those skills. And then being able to get around, just understanding the system, if there's any transportation, how to catch a ride, how to use things like Uber or Lyft, how to even use buses and cabs and taxis. And then everybody wants friends. Who doesn't? And so really thinking about that, what we call social capital, but really is building those connections. And so this is really critically important for youth to develop these. So how do youth get there? So I talked about really having the youth really need to understand what is in their community. Most students, when they graduate from high school, will probably stay in the general community they live in if they have a disability, partly because that's where their support system is. It might even be where their resources are. The reason they may move is when they have to go to get additional services, and they may be in a larger community. So getting to know their community. Absolutely the importance of getting work experiences. If you think about the importance of this, students really need to understand what are some possible careers, what are expectations of an employer, and what's the expectation of those soft skills, reliability, hygiene. We'll talk more about that. There's, again, additional training and opportunities for careers, understanding and learning household tasks, and then financial literacy. This is really critically important. What is a checking account? How do you manage this? How do you budget? Yes, I want to move out into my own apartment. That means 1 month's rent, sometimes 2 months. And so what does that mean to be able to save up for a car, or what's a loan? How do you pay back credit cards? So understanding that, and then understanding your local transportation options. What is available in your community? And really one of the things that's so important when we're talking about making those friends is having students with disabilities, having students in special education, participating in school activities and clubs and part of the school. That's where some people make lifelong friends, and others learn about experiences that they gained in those sports or community clubs or school clubs and organizations. They learn skills there, and they learn to get along with people, and they meet people and develop really good social skills. So when we talk about the first initial stage of how to think about getting students and expanding their opportunities for employment, we have to gain the knowledge from the student as to where are their passions. It's called discovery. But basically what you're doing is discovering and helping the student discover what is it that I'd like to do after I'm done with school. And I need to get some work experiences now. How do I get those work experiences to tell me that? So what makes you happy? Why do you want to work? If a person stays in receiving benefits their whole life, they will always be in poverty. They'll never be out of poverty. So think about, well, some people need benefits for maybe Medicaid services, maybe medical care. Well, if they do need it, then how can they still work and be able to maintain their benefits? And you absolutely can. And then what are things that they like to do? What are opportunities they can have to volunteer? What are their fears or what are their concerns? What do they see as their barriers to employment, or what do others see as a barrier? And then what is their strengths, their gifts, their abilities? Everybody has something that they can do well, and let's help that student discover that. And then kind of get an idea of what kind of hours would a student want to work. Well, just saying I want to work 10 to 2 may not be feasible, but if they say I'd rather work second shift, I'd rather work third shift. And that's good to know. For students that have attendants that come in the morning, starting a job at 7 in the morning is going to be a great challenge. I'll tell you that right now, having tried to find workers that can come in early in the morning for people that need personal care and assistance, it is a challenge to get workers available during those earlier hours. So talking about the discovery, the label is not at all what's important. Really, discovery is helping that student and you think about, and all the people around that student, what are their skills, their interests, what's their personality, how might that match in a work setting, and what are their learning styles? Absolutely, the label makes not a difference. It, of course, adds challenges and barriers, don't get me wrong. I understand that. Again, I have done this work for many, many years. But it doesn't matter. It's not about the disability. It's more about what does that person bring to a potential employer, and how do we match that with businesses that need those skills or that personality or those interests. So we look at building this positive personal profile. I'm not saying you're going to ignore the barriers or the challenges this person has, but I don't want us to talk about that the whole time we're talking about discovery. This process is about really thinking about what is this person's dream? What are their goals? If they say, I really want to be a nurse, well, maybe that person will not have the academic skills ever to be a nurse, but what can they do? Would they have the ability to go through a certified nursing assistant program? Maybe not. Would they have the ability to work in a healthcare setting? Yes, there are many ancillary jobs that are in healthcare settings that would be perfect for students that may have more limitations. So really going on that positive personal profile, that's, I guess, my key to this, is to really think about what are those traits that are really going to bring that person into that work setting and have them be successful. So we're talking skills. This is not a deficits approach. So we want to reframe the perception. Yes, you can work. And having families reframe their conversation. Yes, I do want my son or daughter to work. And having the person with the disability themselves say, yes, I want a job. Yes. And then having employers, it's kind of this whole 3, 4, 5 ring circus. It's having the employers say, yes, I see value in hiring people with disabilities. And then having us as teachers and as adult service providers saying, yes, I believe in you and I'm going to help you find jobs. And so we really want to focus on sort of what is it that that person likes? What are the features of it? So like when we said a person might like healthcare, then we look at what kind of jobs, what kind of skills that student might need in order to work in the healthcare setting. And so we want to shift the employer to thinking, this is added value. You have a person that is going to come and work. Maybe they're going to do a customized job description, but you also have the support system that employee you hire off the street does not have. And that means that you've got some additional resources as an employer that would be providing additional training. They might get some tax credits. So there's additional added value to the employer, and that's good. So we want to target settings that brings that job seekers' unique characteristics and skills as assets. And when I talk to employers and help find jobs, I'm always talking about the reason why it's a really great reason why they'd want to hire this particular student. And I bring out all the positives. And of course, there may be some challenges, but is that what you talk about when you're doing your interview or if you're building a resume? I don't think so. It means that that would be a conversation you'll have once you've talked to this employer about the potential. So we're going to talk about making sure you're kind of matching the right work environment with the person. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So definitely youth with disabilities who work have better health and stronger sense of belonging, purpose, and self-worth. Now you know this as well because people are always saying, well, what do you do for a living? We do a lot of our self-value in the jobs that we have or the work that we do. And so having a student with a disability saying, I want to work just like my mom and dad. I want to work just like my brothers and sisters. I want to have a job. I want to be proud of. I want to make some money. Some people might not even understand the value of how much they're making, but the value of working is really significant. So they've actually done research on this. And also when youth with disabilities work, where they rely less on public benefits. Now, some youth may be able to go off benefits and they'll be able to work completely off their Social Security income. Others will remain on the disability income, whether it's SSI or SSDI, and they may continue, but then they'll be able to work and still have a stronger income to live on or being able to live on their own. When people with disabilities work, they're taxpayers. And this is a really good sign. This is something I talk to employers. I said, you know, people with disabilities, they don't want to be just tax recipients. They want to be taxpayers. Let's give them the opportunity to be taxpayers by letting them have a job and giving them an opportunity to contribute back to their communities. Employers have really understood, especially large businesses, understanding that diversity is really important. And as businesses are growing, they know that importance, that expanding those opportunities. And so making those connections with businesses can be really important. And then there's research that says youth with disabilities with at least 2 work experiences while in high school are 5 times more likely to have a job once they're out of school. That's significant. Now, here's the discovery process. So I'm going to give you, if you email me, I am happy to give you a supported employment assessment, a job profile, a functional assessment. These are tools that I've used over the years, and it really helps give you information about that student and really kind of developing a plan. How are you going to plan? When they're still in school, they can still start planning for what kind of work experiences. Are they going to go through the transition program? Are they going to participate in the 18 to 21-year-old? Or are they leaving school at 18? So giving those students opportunities for job shadows, temporary work experiences, business tours, these are all typical things that students have an opportunity to do, whether they're in special ed or not. It's so important that we give these opportunities. Making sure you're documenting this, and then we'll talk some more about that. And then really looking at that work environment. So a student that is really good at communication, is social, gets along with people, that's great to have customer service. But you may have some students that may not do that as well. And so they may have some things they do that draw attention to them. Their personality might be that noise of customers might be more than they can handle. So really looking at what type of work environments can that student be most successful in. And thinking about that workplace culture. So it's so important when we go in to really understand how are coworkers interacting? How do they communicate each day? And then is there customer interaction? Dress code. Is there a dress code to go in that work area, or are there uniforms? Does the student like indoor or outdoor work? There's both. Noise level, lights, thinking about all of those factors, those even physical environmental factors. I think about that when I'm having a person in mind that I'm wanting to find a job for that would match them. both in their personality and of course their skills. But a lot can be taught and trained once you find an environment that's going to be a good work environment. Temperature, and does the student like to move around, or do they want to stay in one place? So thinking about a student that just is not going to sit for very long, well, don't give them a job sitting at a desk. If you have a student that needs to move around and walk around, give them a job that's more physical. So work experiences. This is so important when you're thinking about the opportunity to really explore careers. And think about your first jobs. And when you were looking at very first jobs that you had, what did you do in high school? I'm sure all of you did something not that you're doing today, correct? So I was picking cucumbers, I was a waitress at A&W, babysitting. You think about all the different jobs that you did. And then when you put those together, what did you learn from those jobs? You learned critical skills, reliability, listening to a boss, punching in and out, dress code, hygiene expectations. You learned about how to do job tasks, how to run a cash register, how to have customer service, even working outdoors. What's the expectation there? So really, one of the things that career exploration is so important are those first work experiences. Now, sometimes a student can go out for informational interviews, have people from the work area in your community come in and talk about their jobs and their careers. Have opportunities for some of the students to go on tours to see what is actually happening in some of those businesses. Job shadowing is a great way for a person to be able to follow someone for a whole day, sometimes just a couple hours, sometimes maybe a week. It's really varied on what a job shadow might be, but it gives a student an opportunity to see somebody working in a specific career of interest to them. And then getting some work sampling. So an idea of this might be, can you see what types of jobs might be available to that student in the community? And then look in the classroom, and are there things they can do back in school? Because I know sometimes transportation budgets can be a challenge, but what are things that they can do? So in healthcare, teaching hand washing, especially during these times, we're all kind of stuck in our houses, right? And we're trying to figure out how to make sure that we're not passing on a virus. Well, in the healthcare system, really hand washing and knowing how to put on and take off gloves, how to wear a mask, those are things that are needed in certain healthcare, well, all healthcare settings is hand washing and gloves. And so really thinking about teaching those skills. Are there skills about, how to, when in retail, is there a store in your high school that the student can get some experience in retail? So what kind of work sampling might be available? And then service learning is with volunteer. We all volunteer. Most of us have some opportunities or have done something over our lifetimes or currently that we're volunteering. Those are really important for our students to get those experiences too, or adults with disabilities as well, because those are the opportunities you make connections. And we're talking about networking. So this is where some networking happens, but also it gives you some sense of giving back to your community. And just because you have a disability doesn't mean you wouldn't want to give back to your community. So I highly recommend any opportunity for service learning. I look at Special Olympics in Wisconsin. We do polar plunge, we cut out the ice in the lake, and we jump in the cold water. And so we do it for fundraising for Special Olympics. But I want to make sure in that group, either at the tables, volunteers that are bringing in the jumpers, or teams of jumpers, or people giving t-shirts, it should include the Special Olympians, because that's the critical part of really learning about participating in activities and understanding, again, this is a world of work. Getting internships, apprenticeships. I know in Wisconsin, we found that our special education students use apprenticeships very little. As we talked about, how can we build more connections to apprenticeship opportunities for students in our special education programs? So the job hunt really is about really getting these experiences, getting temporary work experiences. Often vocational rehabilitation is willing to help provide some funding for on-the-job trainings. Really understanding what interviewing skills are. and what you need to look like when you come in for an interview, and then really looking at what academic skills you might need, what are the actual expectations of that student or that job. And then I highly recommend anytime your student participates in anything, whether it's a job shadow, work experience, a volunteer experience, get the person that they've worked with to provide a simple reference, maybe even give them an outline of what you'd like to see for the reference. But references are really important to have, and so often our students have very few, and so because they have a lot, they don't have as many connections to the community. So anytime you have that, please put that into writing for them. So, roles and responsibilities of staff. So when you have the students in the work setting, you want to look at how to orient your students to the workplace. That really is the responsibility of the job coach, employment specialist, paraprofessional, job trainer. There are a bunch of titles to the person that goes in with the youth into the job site. But really, it's so important that that student and the staff understand how to help orient it to the workplace. Where are they going to be? You know, just what are the expectations, especially what are the social interaction expectations? Really critical for the new worker to understand that. What are some consequences if there is inappropriate behaviors going on? If questions are too personal space, how close are you talking to people? Understanding just cell phone use, that's a big one. Be really clear what's okay and what's not okay. For your staff too, the person going in, it should be understood what is okay or not okay in that work setting with cell phones. And then also, how does the student communicate with their coworkers? How are they going to communicate with the supervisor? And then it's so important that the job coach, I'm going to call him that at this point, orient the other people within that setting. So having the coworkers and the supervisor kind of know, what is your role? Why are you there? Coworkers often wonder, who is that person following that new worker? What's going on? So really helping to understand what your role is there, and that the whole purpose of your being with that student or a youth or adult with disabilities is really just helping them understand, I'm here to provide some additional training, but it's so important that they learn the job, that from you, that you can help to teach these skills, but I'm here for that added support for problem solving. And so really helping the coworkers and the supervisor who might be doing some initial training of the job to really show that you are their support system. So important to be communicating also with the family, or if there's residential staff or support staff at home, really helping them understand what are the expectations of that work setting. How are they to be dressed? Is there a lunch break? If yes, is there a refrigerator? Is there a microwave? Just understanding those things. We've had people send those microwave meals to the work setting, and there's no microwave there. So it's like, okay, now we got to retell the staff, nope, we need something else. So the employer, though, also needs to understand what is their responsibility. So we really want the employer to clearly define to the employee, and of course the job coach is there too, what are the expectations of that work performance? What are they expecting? Quality and quantity, both. It's important to know what's expected, what should it look like, what's the outcome supposed to be, and what are the expectations of social interactions. So we really need the employer to provide the direction and really discuss when the worker is going to get the evaluation done, and then teaching skills of successful job performance. So really communicating to you, and then giving them the information of, as if you are fading from the site, sometimes you are, sometimes you're not, but then really understanding the role or the hope or the expectation is, we want this worker to be as independent as they can. This is great that we can fade our supports, and really building the expectation that you're not going to be there the whole time, or that your support will get less and less. And then the student really needs to understand their responsibilities. What do you need to know in order to do this job? What do you need to know to perform successfully? What are the soft skills that are needed? And be very clear and very concise and very specific in explaining what those expectations are. And so you know the person, the new worker, you're going to know them. You're going to know how to deliver this message in a way that was really understandable. So being very respectful, using very age-appropriate language, and then really helping to say, you know, I'm going to be here. You're doing so well. I'm going to leave for an hour. I'll come back. Show that you can be trusted for that as well. And then coworkers need to know too, if you're going to leave the work setting and then coming back, they need to know what the expectation is for that. So again, with Fair Labor Standards, you have to understand that if work experiences do need to be paid, and as long as the worker is providing added value to the business, then they need to be on payroll. Again, like I say, vocational rehabilitation sometimes can help with some of those expenses for that initial training for an employer, given that it can take longer to train this job. But just so you know, the age expectations in your state for 14, 15, 16, 17, and over 18. So I know each state may have some standards, but really important for you to do that and to get your work permits, learn about youth on the job trainings, and what work permits are going to be required, how many hours can they work, what type of duties can they have. So, and then getting the parents' consent. So building this personal profile, we talked about, you know, once you're on the job, but I want to go back just quickly to say, when an employer is learning about a student and you're going to say, here's some, you know, things that the student has to offer, here's some of the skills that they can bring to your business. Sometimes this can be digital. Sometimes it can be a portfolio. It might be just something the student puts together, pictures, and they put together things that they enjoy doing, and then they put together why they would want to work for that business. Make it as personalized as possible. You can also do a 1-minute video that you could link and the employer could watch it. And what it does is this is personalizing. The student will say, you know, I really want to work at your business. This is why I think I'd be a good employee. And now we're personalizing this name on a piece of paper, that resume. And I like this opportunity that you can make it more personalized. So really making statements that convey who they are and why they would be a great employee for that company, and try to make it as specific to that business as possible. So I thought what's always important, and I've mentioned this a little bit earlier, the importance of disability benefits. So employment is always an option, always. Now you might have to limit the number of hours or the amount of income that individual, once they're over 18 and out of school, may be able to work. But there are student earned income exclusions. So student can be working quite a few hours and all that income is excluded from their determining their disability benefit. Now, this is all, there's a lot about impairment related work expenses, past plans, ticket to work. Social Security does want people to work, although they're still a long ways. They have lots of disincentives, unfortunately, yet for people with disabilities to work. But just get benefits counseling if you're able for that individual, and find out exactly what they can earn, whether they're on SSI or on SSDI. They're two different programs, two different rules, two different expectations. But please know and understand, because that is probably one of the biggest barriers that families say, my son or daughter cannot work because they cannot lose benefits. And you can say, yes, you can work and keep your benefits. Of course, there's caveats to that. So it's important that you know what those are, what the limitations are. So job preferences are important, and we talked about this. I like this one. It's like, I hate a job where you have to get up early in the morning, and I hate a job where you stay in the same place all day. And then Lucy finally says, I hate a job where you have to be nice to everybody. So really thinking about what job preferences make the most sense for students. This is a really great work experience that Ben talks about. It's on our website. You go to attainmentcompany.com and type in pre-employment, and it'll take you to this page. We have several videos on that page, and I think Ben's was like the second one in. And Ben had an opportunity to work at Waukesha Memorial Hospital his last year of school. And then what this did was give him the connection to that employer. And I love this video because it talks, I mean, really, it's hard to even know Ben has a disability at all. And it's because he's been normalized in a work setting, and he's part of that work setting. And those co-workers and the employer and the parents have really talked about the benefits of him in his job. And I really just wanted to share that with you. So employer engagement, we talk about it as an art and a science. So you really remember, you are approaching business, and you're in the, you got your degree as either a teacher, or maybe you're a paraprofessional, or maybe you're an adult service provider, and who knows what your background is, but none of you really were in the background right now of business. Otherwise, you'd have gone into business. So, but you have moved into the world of business when you're placing youth in jobs. I can't express that more importantly. So it's going to be really important to understand the process of making connections to employers. So community mapping is one of the ways that we talk about to take an inventory of the businesses in that community that would match up well with that student's interests. So here's some business engagement, my top 10 list. Research the growth trends. So what's going on in that community that's growing? And look for the new, more emerging industries. Healthcare, of course, as is informational technology. But we're finding manufacturing is growing, as is construction. Now, I say all this knowing that things may look differently once we're not in our situation now with COVID-19. So I understand that it's going to be a different world when we go back. Will those employers still be there? Will they still have the people with disabilities working there? Will they be open to having students coming in for work experiences and jobs? I understand that, but I need to still talk to you as if things are going to get better, and I know they will. So one of the things you want to look at in your communities, and it's going to be different whatever state you're in, whatever county you're in, whatever city you're in, looking at what the opportunities are locally. So what are some hidden jobs? What's going on in that community? Where are some opportunities for networking? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then what's the benefit? So one of the things we capitalize on, if you're a school district, capitalize on that and talk to businesses as a school district, because that already gives you credibility. And then if you're an organization in the community, talk to them as a business as well. You are a business in this community. And so you're going to talk to them as another business to business. Talk about on-the-job trainings. You want to form partnerships. It's possible that you'll partner with other school districts that are maybe other high schools in your community that are maybe connecting to employers, and you may all be connecting to the same businesses. So any way you can do that collaboration and partnership is great. If there's any business organizations in your community, join them, be part of them, the Lions Club, the JCs, whatever the Chamber of Commerce is. Get connected to those as much as you possibly can, because that's where business meets. And then how can you use your social media? How do you use your technology to make these connections? And then it's so important to present yourself in a very professional way, business to business. And anything and then school district to business, those collaborations and partnerships have been going on for years. And so really making those connections is so important. So what are people doing who live in that community? Now, my organization that I used to run in the Support Employment Organization was work opportunity in rural communities. So we automatically were looking at communities, sometimes only 600 people, a couple thousand people. So we had to be pretty creative in looking at what was available in that community, or where did people commute to for jobs? Are people working remotely? How many service industry, healthcare jobs, agricultural, manufacturing? Look at your categories of types of jobs, your target markets, and what businesses fit within each one of those. And then are you training your students to meet the labor market needs? So if the labor market says we're going to need a lot more personal care workers for our seniors as we have a larger healthcare system in our community, How are you training those students to be able to go into that labor market? Maybe manufacturing is growing in your community. How do you get students trained to be able to take those jobs? And then, are there any opportunities for self-employment? So creating an inventory of your businesses is really important here. How many large businesses? How many medium? How many are less than 50? Now, maybe there's, 51% of our businesses have over 500, but in my communities that we supported people in, not a single business was over 500, none of them. And so we had to find those small family-run businesses in those smaller communities. But if you're in large cities, you're going to look at those corporations and how do you build those relationships at that level? So when you're looking at these, what is currently going on? Has those corporations hired people with disabilities? Look on their website. Do they have diversity officers? Is there opportunities beyond custodial and fast food? And that's so often where we go to. But think about beyond that. What opportunities might be for growth in your community? And then, does your school already have connections to those corporations? There might be already made connections. Or if you're a nonprofit organization, are there people on your board that have connections to large corporations? So this is where you want to look at more complex jobs. People can be taught and trained in a variety of jobs. And I've seen amazing opportunities in hospital settings. If you know anything about Project Search, they've done some amazing work in teaching some very complex jobs to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We already talked about this. Your first job, what did you learn? And I know the skills that you learned in there were applied either to decide this is not what I want to do, or I want to get additional education, or I love working with people and I'm going to continue this world. So in networking, I'm wanting to talk a little bit about this because this is really about making those business connections. So what you're doing now, how are you connecting to businesses? Are you currently connecting to businesses? And if yes, where are you seeing that success? Now think about that job that you had in high school or even junior high. Think about that. Now, how did you get that? I'll bet many of you would say, it's because my parents knew somebody, or I knew somebody, or my friend told me about this job. It's so often personal connections. So thinking about what it is that really helps to engage employers and to do that successfully. Here's a guide that I gave a resource. It's on the website it's askearn.org, and then you can find it. It's a great website. And then, so how are jobs found? And they said 66 to 85%, was quite a range there, of jobs are found through personal connections. And only a small number are found through newspaper ads, the internet, sending out resumes. Now, it doesn't mean that those resources aren't valuable, but don't depend on them. They're only one tool in the toolbox. So networking is a huge important tool. So what's your personal sphere of influence? So I always have people, when I have a training, I say, open up your cell phone, and I want you to list the contacts you have in that cell phone under each of the different types of professions. So now I'm going to start looking, okay, here's service industry. Here's chiropractors, bankers I know, doctors. And then you go from there to, here's healthcare. These are people I know in these settings. And here is retail. Here's people I know in these settings. Here's manufacturing. Here's some names I know. So now you're starting to build a list of people you know in each of these different professions and businesses, maybe your associations. And that's what networking is. Finding names of people and thinking about how do I feel about which ones would I contact? Some of them it wouldn't be appropriate to contact, but some of them, why not? Why not? So that's your opportunity to make some connections to people and potential businesses. Now, your family members also are connected. So often at that IEP transition meeting, what I would recommend is having a conversation about jobs and talking about businesses and say, you know, this person was really interested in being a nurse. And so what do any of you have any connections to nursing homes, clinics, assisted living? Maybe even they like animals, vet clinics, pet stores, dog walking apps. I mean, so thinking about all the things that engage that family, but also engage the professionals in that room. And there's a networking opportunity right there. Who knows who is so important to have those conversations. So here's another thing that I often talk to employers, and I say, you know, 80s, this is not new. This is old. It's 15 years old. And I tried to find newer research, but in the end, I believe it's still very relevant. 87% of the American public would prefer to give their business to companies that hire people with disabilities. And 92% of the American public view companies that hire people with disabilities more favorably than those who do not. And I say that to businesses, and they'll go, oh, you know, so really, I talk to businesses as well. I say, who are your customers coming in here? And then don't you want your workforce to reflect your customer base? So if you have people with disabilities coming in here, it makes sense that you hire people with disabilities as well. So here's some examples of students on the job. Wisconsin got a grant to do this Let's Get to Work, WI. It's the whole website's letsgettoworkwi.org. And I love this website because it's filled with resources for schools. The school districts got a small amount of grant money, but they did some really exciting things with students to promote inclusion in school and inclusion in the workforce in their communities. And there were all different size school districts, and so they have a lot of cool resources on that website, a lot of toolkits, and also videos of students working. And then this guide is Department of Labor has Creating a Path to Employment that I like as well. So engaging employers and businesses, employers are really looking for some key things. And you'll hear this, is that those soft skills are really what's important. They're willing to train the person that comes in off the street for a job, but they need soft skills. So anything you can do to promote, teach, reinforce your students and youth for these soft skills is critically important. Time management, proper attire, hygiene, listening, and how to engage in a communication, listening and responding, having a work ethic, working on a team. Are you giving students the opportunity to work as part of a team? Being flexible, that can be a challenge for students. Being honest, reliable, and having that positive attitude. These are the things that employers are looking for. So when we talked about doing informational interviewing, we talked about one is for information about a business, but the other one might be some advice and suggestions that business may have for the student. So it gives you a good opportunity even if maybe you make arrangements for a student to go and interview, or maybe a couple students and staff to go and do an informational interview. Many people love talking about the work that they do. And so this is a great way to show that, for them to get that experience. And then to kind of give back to students. It's nice to have students come and learn about your career and learn about the job that you do. Especially a lot of your entry-level jobs. I feel like this is opportunity for mentorship too. If you've had students who've graduated and are working in jobs, it would be a great way for that mentor to come back and talk to the students about what it was like, what they learned, and the important skills that they had and learned to be successful in their job. So here's some sample informational interview questions as well. And so really, it's good to know sometimes when you're doing a customized job description, in other words, you're pulling jobs that are specifically matching the employer needs, but also the skills of the student. And when are their busiest times? Maybe there's things that really they need somebody to come in during that time, especially for those who are looking for part-time employment. Maybe there are tasks that can be done more efficiently, or maybe there's things that need to be done more often that don't get done. And then also we talk about, are there areas of expertise? So you may have people in your business doing work, and this is, I'm going to talk about this again, lean business concepts, but they may be doing work that you could bring a student in to take some of those pieces of work, and then just like for overtime as well. I had a company we went in and talked to, and they go, yeah, we're always having to do overtime where we're getting temps to do this work. And I said, really? So we are able to place a gentleman there at this job site. It was a great work setting, very supportive work setting, and he could work as many hours as he wanted. Now he was limited because of his disability benefits because he needed his Medicaid at that point. But so really it was talking to that employer about those issues. And then we talked about having an elevator speech, and sometimes that's okay. This is when you use it. So when people say, well, what do you do for a living? I like to say, you know, I would like to put together this quick and dirty conversation about what is it that I do? And then I want to ask them what they're doing. This is called networking. So I'm going to say, well, this is what I do, but it sounds like, what is it that you're doing? Well, that sounds interesting. Can you tell me more about that? So it's not really meant as your sales pitch, but you want to do a short way of saying, well, what I do is I talk to businesses and to see what their needs are, hiring needs. And then I work with people with disabilities, because that I do. And we look at how we could meet the employer needs with this untapped labor pool. Now, you see, I'm using business terminology. So quite often, this customized employment might be so go back to that. So just develop something that you would feel comfortable saying, practice it with other people, and see what they think when you're doing those elevator speeches. All right. So if you go to onetonline.org, it's a place where students can go and look at specific types of jobs and what education, what's typical skills required for those jobs, and actual, I think, wages as well. But onetonline.org, highly recommend that website. So you're talking again about that lean business concept. So this is when you're looking at customized employment. Students that can't take an existing job description, maybe because they have some limitations, but thinking about, okay, they can still work, they could still work for that business, but how do we make this under a lean business concept? My sister is actually a black belt in lean manufacturing. And what they do is they look at existing work and then they try to find a more efficient way of doing it. And so if you're looking at a business, for example, you've got registered, I've been using the nurse example throughout, so I'm going to keep using it. If you are having a registered nurse at her or his wage, filling and stocking the room, that isn't an efficient use of that person's time. They're needing to do patient care. So instead, you bring in a student that's going to be doing all the stocking. We had someone who went through and did all of the scanning of any equipment that was in that room. So thinking about how you build restocking all of the blankets in the blanket warmers. There's so many behind the scenes jobs that need to be done that can be done at a wage that's commensurate with those tasks. So that's what lean business is, finding efficiencies in a company and looking at ways that most nursing homes just don't even have enough certified nursing assistants. There's huge shortage. And so thinking about what can a person come in to do, maybe they can't do hands-on patient care or resident care, but maybe they can come and support that certified nursing assistant with tasks. So that's what that is about. So talking to that human resources individual and saying, here is a job description of what I think Mary could come and do in your business, and really actually redefining a job description. And sometimes HR will, and sometimes they do not. They don't want to go away from any of their existing job descriptions. At that point, then it's networking. Who do you know that's the VP or the president or somebody, management, in that setting that would be willing to move out of their existing job description and create one for the student or adult that you're talking about. So whenever you can involve the job seeker, I really think this is important. To me, why I say that is when we're thinking about opportunities for that job seeker to think about, what can I do? Instead of When are you going to get me a job? Nope. It's what can we do together? And whatever they can do, maybe they research a business, maybe they go pick up resume or pick up applications, whatever you can do to engage them. Developing a list of features and benefits, really identifying some networking, joining groups, looking at the features of what you have to offer the business. You are value added to that business in hiring somebody that has a disability or somebody that you're going to be supporting and bringing in. So the elevator speech, developing relationships with businesses, conducting informational interviews, and number two, for some reason I don't have number one. Number two, writing a handwritten thank you note. So important. Nobody does it anymore. Nobody gets handwritten notes. So if an employer gets a handwritten thank you note from you and that student when you went in either for the informational interview, you went in for the tour, or if you went in for an interview, that is gold. So I want you to look at mapping out your communities. I want you to look at tracking the businesses, somehow, some kind of database you need to look at. Here's my communities, here's the places that's going to match up with the student. And then track the times you're talking to them, and then put alerts on your calendar when you need to go back and recontact employers. It is really, people say, well, I don't like sales. Well, otherwise I've gone to sales. I get that. But this is still, you are offering a really great concept. You're offering qualified candidates. You believe in the product. You believe that employers are better off hiring people with disabilities than they are without. I believe it. And so really talking to that employer, you're going to help them diversify their workforce. You are value added. You're going to help facilitate this business to really reach out to everybody, all members of the community, in looking at their workforce. So thinking about the environment for that student, what does well, what would lead to success, and then bringing people together, really having students share job leads. Sometimes they might know some, having people talk about it at the IEP meeting, having people to share names or people that they might know. So I always say, help others find their passion. Having a job changes lives, not only financially, but social connections as well. And even self-worth and self-value. And connecting with business can involve a lot of challenges. Sometimes it's out of people's comfort zone, but I do believe everyone can work. This is one of my favorites. What matters most is how you see yourself. And we want our students and you to feel that, yes, you can do this. Yes, your students can be successful in jobs, regardless of what their disability is. And yes, you can have a great opportunity to make connections to business. So here's my contact information, janet@attainmentcompany.com. I want you to feel free to email me, and you can ask, we have a certificate of completion. If you go through this training, I'm happy to send that to you. Also, I can send you the assessment information. I can send you the PowerPoint. I'm happy to do that. And so I want to thank you so much for taking this time and being part of this training. And I have another one called Systematic Instruction, and I'm doing a couple more this week as well. So one on pre-ETS and one on mindfulness, pre-employment transition services and mindfulness for teachers and students. So ask for whatever you would like, and I'm going to have links to all these trainings, and I hope you enjoyed this experience. So thank you so much.